So welcome to the Data Assessment and Accountability Network. For those of you who are in the room, we're glad you were able to make it in person. Grab some coffee and a few snacks to get through the morning. If you're online in our new hybrid mode, thank you for joining us. We have the first DAAN meeting of the year, although we had a new DAAN for orientation last month, which was spectacular. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But we just want to go over a few things. This is a hybrid meeting. For those of you who are in the room, there are no planned emergency drills this morning. So if you hear a drill, or last time we met, I don't remember which meeting it was, it was in August, we actually had an earthquake. First get under the table if there's an earthquake, but then you will exit to the section 11. So in the case of an emergency, we do have a checklist we'll go through to make sure everybody is with us. For those of you who are online, we are doing something a little different this year with our hybrid meetings. We continue to offer all our DAAN meetings, both online and in person. But we're really going to try to focus the first half in the core presentation about everything everybody needs to know. And then we're going to cut down the Zoom. For those who are in the room, we do an extension activity. So we want you to be jealous if you're online right now that you're not getting the extension activity. You'll see it in the slides, what we're covering, but it's really more an opportunity to learn best practices from things and have a chance to share and a chance to network with one another. So we're trying to incentivize you to come back. We know that you can't make it here. You definitely want to be getting the same information. So here's our DAAN team. Let me give you a quick introduction to all of us. We have two units who work together to bring you the DAAN meetings: the Accountability and Data Literacy team and the Assessment team. The Accountability Data Literacy team includes me, Evan Bartelheim, Project Director, and Hillary Weissman, as well as our amazing staff, including Roy Lewis, our Senior Data Processing Specialist, Jeremy Vinluen, both of whom are standing in the back of the room, our data guys, and then Karina Nahara, who's over here checking people in. And then we're also joined by our assessment team, which includes Stephen Bartlett and Sarah Nitzos. We're sitting up front. I don't know if you're online, if you can see this vast array of intelligence to my right, as well as Diane Martin, who works supports their work. So a couple things on the agenda today. That's the welcome and housekeeping we're going through right now. Then we'll go dive into some accountability updates, and there's a lot going on. The fall is always a rich period for accountability. We have some CALPADS and data updates that are very specific to accountability in the dashboard we want you to know about, and assessment. Then we have some legislative updates, a few that are relevant to your assessment and accountability work, and then our assessment updates, including kind of a joint process that's going to set us up. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to break after that, and we're going to have a session that is just for those folks who are in the room. So basically, after the assessment updates, which includes an update from Marcus Betancourt, our success agent from ETS, we'll take a break, and then for those of you who are in the room, then we'll launch into our Communicating CASP Results extension activity. For those of you who are online, it's all on the slides, but you're going to miss out the interaction that we're going to provide for that section. We have all our resources loaded in our Canvas page, and I would like to point out we did have a new day for orientation back in September, and we had a good turnout here in person, and those resources are located under this button, and we will continue to update this. It's basically, we're looking, if you're brand new to DAAN and your role in assessment and accountability, you've never done this work before, we tried to put together a morning that offered, here's what you need to know to succeed in your first 90 days, and we'll continue to update this for people who join, because we know people get assigned this role at any point in the year, and you just expected to run with it. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to kind of see what you should need to know. And then, as we always like to note, the purpose of our meetings are to give you the latest information in the areas of data assessment and accountability. The information is always, as good as it can be for, things are constantly changing. Not so much as lately as they have in the past, but so as of yesterday, this is the most current stuff that we do know as of yesterday. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat. If you're in the room, we wait till we get you a microphone, or we'll, if you want to be online, you can actually access the Zoom link in Canvas And then you can log in and you could post your question in the chat there as well, even if you're in the room, if you're shy and you don't want to take a microphone. But we will answer them live if we can. We always like to do a follow-up to give additional resources and cite whatever ed code is relevant, or if there are other resources available from the state that you'll have links that you can follow up with. I didn't mention it when we talked about our Canvas page. We loaded a number of resources that are loaded there for today that you may want to reference outside of the meeting, so make sure you check those out. And I'm going to hand it over to Hillary.
Okay, so just a few quick reminders, so don't go too far, Evan. Just a few reminders as I know we're gearing up to talk later today a little bit about CASP data, but some dashboard updates. Just a reminder that this year in 2024, yay, full color. And the visual up here is just going to give you a little bit of an overview since 2017, kind of the evolution that we've seen thus far. So if you do recall, in 2017, it did come out. There was a lot of growth and a lot of change, specifically from the CELT test to then what we now have is the LPAC. Of course, we had COVID, so there's a little bit of a break in accountability. Because of that break in accountability, we spent 2022 with status only, and 2023 all indicators but the CCNI. However, this year, in much anticipation, we will return back to color. And with that being said, because of Senate Bill 114, you understand that this is the second to last publication that will be moving up. So this year, the publication will be released publicly on the 1st of December with the potential release as early as November 22nd. Remember that the early release is going to look different if you are the dashboard coordinator or you have access. In previous years, remember we had like rolling weeks. They would give us a week and you'd have 2 indicators that we could look at. This year, anticipate as your Thanksgiving treat, you will now have 1 week to kind of look at the dashboard. So kind of just another reminder. And with that being said, the slide right here, I think does a pretty good job when you're talking about dashboard metrics and measurements. It's a good foundational image, kind of provides a valuable overview and a distinction between the indicators, the metrics, and the units of measurement. So when you are gearing up to communicate or to present to various educational partners, it's a nice slide to kind of remind you that your academic indicator for ELA and math, and soon to be next year in 2025, you'll have the distance from standard for science. Those are all on a point system versus the other indicators that are going to be percentage and rate. But nonetheless, a valuable slide to lay some foundation and build some capacity. And then as another reminder, again, for even more disaggregation of data, more insight into the needs of LTELs, this is our 14th student group that will be joining the dashboard for the 2024 release. And remember that this group was added via the Senate Bill 141, and it's the first new student group since 2017. And to keep in mind that definition for accountability purposes is a pupil who has not attained English language proficiency within 7 years of initial classification as an English learner. And so some people are asking, who is an LTEL on the dashboard? And as you see here, kind of gives you a layout that the inclusion of long-term English learners as a new student group on the dashboard, they're going to have a significant impact. You're going to see them in all the indicators based upon certain business rules when it comes to chronic absenteeism and suspension rate, cumulative enrollment, that's definitely going to play into account. But the takeaway here is if at any point in time they were an LTEL during the year, they're going to continue to show up as an LTEL. So if you were to receive an LTEL student, and let's say hypothetically the very next day you were to reclassify them, this is excellent, right? However, note that they're going to appear, but this is a good problem, right? Because typically reclassified students perform very well, so they're still going to see significant gains. And I said, no, don't go too far, so please join us, Mr. Arnold.
I'm back. I really feel, I just need the clicker. I want to say hello to our friends here in TV land. Remember, hey everybody, We know you're there. We know you're watching. So science. This is exciting, I think. If you're a science nerd, having science on the dashboard. We've been waiting to put science on the dashboard. I mean, the folks in the science world, Anthony Kwan, our STEM guy here, I know he's been advocating for this for a while. So State Board did approve the addition of science to the dashboard at their July meeting. And the indicator, of course, will reflect similar to the other assessment indicators, assessment-oriented indicators. It's going to look at the results from both the CAST and the California Alternate Test for Science, which then will include all 5th grade, 8th grade, and students in high school when they're tested in either 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. So there are some additional things to determine at that meeting. This year is the first in a 2-year process, and they really wanted to get to the methodology and determine what's our methodology for determining the students who, or how we'll calculate this. And this was actually kind of a bit of a shift, a last-minute shift. The board, the state was pushing for, that is, was pushing for a percentage met or exceeded being the factors that were considered for the distribution. But the state board arrived at, no, we want to have distance from standard. They wanted to maintain the same methodology that you see on the ELA and the math indicators. And they did note, and this is important, and I'll go over it in a minute or two, there are significant differences in the construction of the science test from Smarter Balance, and those will actually affect what you see. And so it's important if you're an accountability person to understand kind of how these differ, because they're not really, it's not an apples to apples comparison exactly when you see them on the dashboard. So the distance from standard may look very similar, but in fact the tests are quite different. So they may quite mean somewhat different things. There are no performance colors being reported this year because it's not being used for accountability purposes, but they will have both the status and the change. And you can see on the right, this is an example what you would expect to see from what they call the baseball card. So it'll be similar to if you had not enough students, right? You won't have any colors, but it's going to give you your status. It's going to give you your change from the prior year. And you can click on the more details to get down into the student group performance across these things. It's really only for informational purposes. So it's not being used this year in accountability for identification for differentiated assistance or for school level identification for TSI, which we'll get to in just a minute. So it's just primarily for informational purposes. One thing to note, they're not calling this an academic indicator. They're just calling it an indicator right now because the language around ESSA and the ESSA plan the state has indicates that the academic indicators will be used for, so they don't want to confuse people. So it's just being called the science indicator this year. The participation rate is going to be implemented. The state didn't have to apply a participation rate. It's not required under ESSA, but the general consensus of the board was, and this was based on feedback from people even in the science community, that that you wanted to provide some incentive for schools to get the full 95% participation rate. Really, you want 100% participation rate, but applying a penalty if 95% participation rate was not met. This is a calculation that's based on current year students only, right? So it's not a cohort. And I hope everybody online can hear us. We've had those internet problems with Verizon. But so the participation rate, and I have the calculation on the right of the slide here. So if you follow along, this has caused a lot of headaches, I think, in a couple of different meetings I've been in. The numerator is going to include all your 10th grade students who are tested. And for this year, we'll look back to the spring 24 testing. All your 10th grade students who tested, all your 11th grade students who tested, and then all of your 12th grade students who tested. The denominator, and this is where you get that gap, again, 10th grade students who tested, so that's 100% right there. 11th grade students who tested, again, 100%. But then the 12th grade students, and this is where you'll get that gap, is all eligible 12th grade students, both those who tested and those who didn't, right? So by 12th grade, you have to test them. Basically, any students who you weren't able to test in 12th grade, they'll be your students who represent the not tested in the participation rate. And not this year, but the following year, the participation rate will be incorporated. So there'll be some form of a penalty similar to the lowest obtainable scale score, but that's not applied this year. You won't see it, but just so you know, the state in looking at the data, they've seen high school not surprisingly, is the place where it's the most difficult to get 95% participation rate. And statewide, less than 50% of high schools had met the 95% participation rate. So now you start thinking about the 2025 dashboard, which will be based on the testing which will take place this year in the spring. You've got a heavy lift, right? So if you're in charge of assessment for science, start thinking now, how am I going to make sure that we test all of our high school students? If it's easier to test in 11th grade, even though it may feel like it's overwhelming on 11th graders, and having two 12th graders myself who just went through this, it's a lot, right? You've got, not only do you have ELA and math, and all likelihood some AP testing, now you would add science, and then maybe school day SAT, lot of testing that takes place in 7th grade, but realistically, that's probably your best grade you can catch them, and you're supposed to align it with the final course that they're taking in science. And so more and more kids, I think, are taking a third year of science. It's still up to you, but 12th grade testing, that's a very difficult group to grab. So start thinking about high school now. Like I mentioned, the science test is very different, and here are some differences that were noted by the CDE in sharing and making the case for why maybe distance from standard is not completely comparable between the two tests, even though they ultimately landed on going with the distance from standard calculation. But as you know, Smarter Balanced, ELA Math are administered to grades 3 through 8 and 11 every year. Science only administered in 5th, 8th, and then one time in high school. There is a continuous scale. This is a big part of it in the Smarter Balance. So it's a continuous scale. It starts in 3rd grade and goes all the way through 11th grade. There's not a continuous scale. So each grade span that's tested has a different grade scale score. So it's slightly different in that regard too. And then the big part is, I think, that the scale is significantly narrower in science. So the scale differs in every grade with Smarter Balance, but there's a huge range. It's between 467 and 617 points, whereas there's only a 100-point range within science. So what this ends up doing is kind of clustering everybody in science. So it's harder to get that nice bell curve that they use for the distribution on the 5x5s and the colored grids. That said, they're going to make it work, and the percentile change, the percentile of students who are along the distance from standard continuum, they're going to make it work. And so we'll see a 5x5 produced next year, and then they'll have colors on the 2025 dashboard. But just as you know, when you start looking at the scale scores, you may see, oh, look, we're 13 points below standard for science, and we're 13 points below standard for math. Those are not comparable scores, right? 13 points below standard for science is closer to like 60 points below standard in ELA or math, just because of the clustering. So that's the important thing to note. Just a few notes about LCFF assistance. As Hillary mentioned, we have the full return of colors on the dashboard now. So this will be the easiest to, I think it'll be more, a little easier for some people, particularly if you receive the college and career indicator. If you serve grades 9 through 12, you didn't have the benefit of change last year on your college career indicator. It was only the cell bars reflecting status, and almost by definition, with certain student groups, you're going to have more difficulties in getting that high status. But now you have the benefit of change each year. So if you have a continuous improvement model and you're looking at your college career indicator, hopefully you'll see some change each year to move you into a color that wouldn't make you eligible. The LTEL student group is going to be included for the differentiated assistance eligibility determinations, because that's a 1 year, at least for districts, not for charter schools. So that student group, this will be the first time. They're not going to go back retroactively and look at the prior year. So this is the first time the LTELs will appear, and they could lead to eligibility identification for DA. And there's also this additional piece around completing your CALPADS and getting it certified on time. Fortunately, the first time this was applied, which was the end of year submission in August, 0 districts or charter schools in our county failed to meet this deadline. So everybody came in and got it in on time, and hopefully that will continue. And so we won't have any districts that are, or charters that require technical assistance. But even if you do, it's assistance, and you'd be receiving it from us. And we love working with our CalPads people, so we'll stay tuned. We'll know more about that as we move throughout the year. So this is a fun year. If you guys follow along in the ESSA assistance world, and I know some of you do, this year we don't have CSI or ATSI determinations. We made those last year, and it's a 3-year cycle. So this year is the non-CSI ATSI. The only thing, if you were identified for CSI or ATSI last year, you could exit by meeting the exit criteria. So, but there won't be any CSI or ATSI determined. And so this will be the first time we've actually ever had TSI, which is targeted support and improvement. Don't ask me why ATSI comes before TSI. I always thought that was backwards, right? But it's the in-between years. TSI is the in-between years identification. So the pool of schools that will be eligible for TSI will be any of the schools who are not on the CSI or ATSI eligibility list, plus anybody who exits. So you could exit from ATSI, for example, but then be eligible for TSI. And the way that would happen is if you were eligible for a student group, let's say your English learners had you eligible for ATSI, you met the exit criteria for that student group, but now students with disabilities meet the eligibility requirements, then you would be eligible for TSI this year. And we'll get into more detail as we get closer. This will be kind of the model. So every 3 years, you'll have this identification in between, the TSI in between, and then so 2026 dashboard will again. And the significance of CSI and ATSI, obviously CSI has additional requirements for monitoring, but also comes with some funding. You will have some requirements for TSI in terms of your planning, your SIPSA and whatnot. But importantly, CSI and ATSI are also eligible for Williams monitoring. And anybody who was eligible last year for CSI or ATSI will be on the Williams list moving forward. Even if you were to exit this year, you're still on that list because the determination was made last year and that's what they're using. Any questions? All right. Making it easy. So I was curious, I did ask the CD, I'm like, well, wait a minute, if we're not identifying CSI and CSI criteria for eligibility or what's used for identify ATSI, which is a student group level, how then do you determine TSI? Because we don't, and they said, oh, we do. We look back, we use the same criteria that was last used. So you may recognize these. The eligibility criteria for TSI will be the same criteria applied to the student group level that were applied previously. And so you wouldn't be eligible for TSI for your LTELs because TSI it looks at 2 years worth of data. The same student group would have been eligible for 2 years, and LTELs weren't on the dashboard last year. So LTELs are the one exception, couldn't be identified for LTELs this year for TSI, but the other student groups you could be identified as eligible. And we saw this a lot last year. You may have a very small population that they only generated one indicator. If that indicator is red, you've met criterion 1. So we know how it works. You know, it's often those small groups that trip you up, but just be aware of those moving forward. One of the exciting things that's coming this year, and it's probably been a while since we talked about it, and I can guarantee you'll hear more about it as we get closer, is the student growth model data that's going to be reported. And they've actually developed a pretty robust reporting system. It's if you remember, there's a release of this a few years back. They need 3 years worth of CASP data to be able to generate this. And so then we had the disruption because of the pandemic, and we didn't have 3 years worth of test scores. What we did get was a preview of it, and we just got basically a data file, and you could play with it and look at it. Now you're going to have a lot more ability to look at it, and the student growth model is very interesting. A lot of other states have it. It looks at how student groups grew from year to year, so it matches scores, and it looks at a student by individual student level, student from 2022 to 2023, how much did they grow? And then it aggregates student groups, and it compares your school to other student groups across the state. And so you'll get a sense of, we can actually do an apples to apples comparison. It's not just about how this high performing school compared to this low performing school, it's about how individual student groups were able to grow in a year. And it gets to that core question, are we helping our students achieve? It's kind of central to a lot of charter schools conversations about ensuring growth. So this will be really important when it comes out. It's not going to be on the main dashboard, and it's not used for accountability, but will appear on a secondary page, and it probably will come out in early 2025. So expect like February this will get published. and also expect that the CDE will be doing a lot of informational promotion around it so people understand it, because it's a pretty complex formula, and in the past, I think they were concerned that this could be used. Oh, we know how growth models have been used in the past, and so they want everybody to understand what it looks like. It may ultimately be used for accountability purposes moving forward. Just note, I know there's been conversation around that at the state board meetings, but it will not be used for accountability purposes in 2024. It'll just be used for information. Show of hands in the room. How many people in this room are dashboard coordinators? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. So a couple updates. The MyCDE Connect, this is our kind of our dashboard coordinator portal. It's had a few updates. So primarily it's been used, if you heard about it, for the California School Dashboard and the local indicator upload that took place in July of this year. Now they also are running the school accountability report cards, the SARCs, through there, as well as there's the LCAP e-template, not to be confused with our eLCAP, which is LACOE's version, but the LCAP, eLCAP that the state produces is available through there as well. If you haven't, so you want to, there are actually multiple registrations. So if you're already the dashboard coordinator, you may not have all the necessary roles you need just as the dashboard coordinator. There are two things. So if you are also the person who does the SARC, you also need to register using the registration link, register for the SARC coordinator, and you are entitled to, each LEA gets 2 LEA level SARC coordinators, but then each school also gets 2 SARC coordinators. And if you're using their CDE's SARC template as opposed to a third-party vendor, you can get all those people in to help you complete the SARC, much of which is already pre-populated for you. Then in addition, this year, for the first time, we have to upload the approved LCAP, not the board-adopted LCAP, but the approved LCAP, whether it was approved by, depending on your level, if you're a district, you had to have it approved by LACOE. That approved template needs to be uploaded, and the window for that opens on October 14th. And in order to do that, you also have to register as an LCAP e-template coordinator. I know that's confusing because you're like, we don't use the LCAP e-template. We love LACOE's eLCAP, right? My people back here from the LCAP team. That's okay. You still have to get this coordinator role, and when you drill down one level, it gives you the option for either using the eLCAP or for uploading approved LCAP. So that, just so you know, you have to drill down a couple levels, get approved. What happens when you click on the registration link is an email is automatically sent to your superintendent, or if you're a charter school, the charter school's primary administrator who's listed in the CDS directory, and that may be you. So if you already have that status, then you don't have to worry about it. You're already automatically in for all of these roles. Some CALPADS updates. I know you're dying to hear about CALPADS. So we have an updated list of deadlines this year. Most notably is the August 8th deadline for the end of year 1 through 4 submissions. That's up. That's a week earlier than this prior year, the uploads that just ended. And that's in order to meet the requirement to publish the dashboard earlier and earlier every year. If you recall, eventually the dashboard will be published on October 15th, right? So this year we expect it no later than December 1st, possibly as early as November 22nd. The next year we have to have it out by November 15th. It moves up by the time it's, I think, 2026, we'll see the dashboard on October 15th. So just so you know, though, there's a lot of ways that your data for the purposes of accountability is affected. On the fall one, which is going on right now, you've got your LCFF, unduplicated pupil count, which affects your funding, your free and reduced price meal, which affects both your funding and your Title I allocations, your LTEL counts, information that goes in the SARC, information that goes in DataQuest. So a lot of stuff going on. And then fall two, this is primarily your CTC, your Teacher Credentialing Commission data that goes into the TAMO data, which now appears on the dashboard, right? So all these are really important. And then finally, the end of year where you get the biggest impact on the dashboard. So you definitely want to have that, and you're probably going, how do I get more versed in this? I can sense your angst. Like, I don't I don't speak CalPadian. I want to know what's going on, but it's really intimidating. Hey, we've got the answer for you. I know some of you who are here joined us in September. We have this fantastic colleague in Fresno County Superintendent's Office, Rebecca Aguilar, and she has been doing this for a while. She's a counselor at heart, and so she comes with a kind of a counselor's mindset to these things. And she really makes this come alive for people who don't speak CalPadian, and her intent is to speak to the people who are not really super versed in this and to help you develop processes. Here's the report. Here's what you need to be looking for. Here's some red flags if you see this. And it's, we encourage teams to come and CalPADS coordinators can come, but we don't see this as a CalPADS coordinator only type thing. In fact, we had an LEA that sent a whole team from their CTE unit, from their student support services unit, and they had a bunch of people from technology and data there as well. And they were really looking at how can we improve our processes for talking to one another. So this is taking place on December 9th. It's in person. They wanted it exclusively in person. It actually is being simulcast to multiple county offices, and they're all in person too. Even though it's coming across Zoom, they actually have to meet in person. But if you're interested in learning more around how this process works, I strongly encourage you. We have limited capacity. This one is really specifically around a review of Fall 1 and a prep for Fall 2, which is that teacher data. So if you have an HR person and you've been wondering, how can we improve our number of clear people on the TAMO data, let them know about this, bring them to this. So that's coming up. Question?
We have a question, but it's from an audience member.
I have a question on the previous slide regarding the information collected for each report. For the grad rate information, is that changing because all of the due dates are being pushed up? Because I thought that they were going to remove that from end of year reports and push that to another one. But I don't remember.
We have a slide for you.
Okay.
I'm telling you. That's a great question. As it turns out, yes. So the graduate cutoff date, this came up last year, that the graduate cutoff date, when they were saying, no, we're going to move it up, and everybody's like, what about summer grads? We have these students. We used to have till August 15th. Basically, the CDE has decoupled the end of year submission and the collection of the adjusted cohort graduation rate, right? So the date has not changed. It's still August 15th, so you can still capture your summer graduates up until August 15th. So nothing should change about how you collect your summer grads. And so what will change is everything else gets submitted prior to that by August 8th, but this will still give you the same August 15th deadline in which to assure that you've got everything into CalPADS to identify students as having graduated in conjunction with their 2025 class. Now, if they don't get in and they graduate after that date, all is not lost. They still get picked up in the 5th year. So they'll be graduates in the 25-26 data as a 5th year graduate. So that'll go on the dashboard too. So you do get credit. It's not like you lose it. There are multiple, we have multiple levels of reporting. The data quest reports the 4-year only, but then they also have a 4 and 5 year. Dashboard is 4 and 5 year. But just big piece is August 15th still stands. This is exciting news. I don't know if does anybody here use the California College Guidance Initiative? All right, Torrance in the house uses this. And do you like it? It's getting there. Okay, so CCGI, I've seen it presented before, and I think it has some real benefits. In this last year's omnibus budget trailer bill, the Senate Bill 153 passed that requires all public schools who serve grades 9 through 12 to start participating. So by January 2026, LEAs will have to enter a data sharing agreement with CCGI. And by the way, CCGI is UC's, Cal State's organization. It's a third party that runs through them. And then by June 30th of 2026, you'll have to provide the student transcript files that will allow you to provide these transcript informed partner accounts. And as a as a parent of current 12th graders, I can tell you I would really embrace this right now because I'm manually entering all the grades and a lot of that into the Common App and the UC. All that will be automated once this is in place. So it's great for the kids, but how I see it really benefiting our districts is that it should really help clean up your A through G data because they look at the A through G data that you've submitted, and if it's identified as you're identifying it as A through G, it's not on your A through G list, or it's on the A through G list, but you're not identifying it as A through G. Those inconsistencies will get flagged and will help you to clean up your course listings to make sure that you get credit for all the A through G completers. And I know my colleague Stephen has used it before, and so I've seen similar things. Torrance, I mean, it's getting there, is right, but I think that ultimately it'll help really clean up a lot of your data. And there are 2 flashes. I've got the links in here. They're also loaded into the Canvas page. But take a look at those. They spell out the process, the timeline, and many more benefits that are outlined. And the timeline for you can begin almost immediately offering the basic accounts for students. Hillary mentioned earlier the addition of LTELs, the dashboard. This is a new student group, and just for clarity, this is the LTEL definition that's in Ed Code 52052, which we know is slightly different than the definition that's in Ed Code 313.1, which has been around for a while, that includes a bunch of different categories, including making progress on English and performance on a state test of basic skills. This is straight up the 7 years since identified as an English learner. And so to help LEAs to look at this student group, the CALPADS is adding a couple of reports, or adding LTELs to a couple of really helpful reports, including the cumulative enrollment, the count, which that'll be used for your suspension and for your chronic absenteeism, so you'd have that to look at. Then the 15.1 and 15.2, these are really your accountability, the dashboard, end of year outcome reports, and 15.2 will give you student level data, so you'll know who those students are. So that should be, and 15.2 is constantly populating, so you could start identifying your LTELs in high schools as soon as this comes out. So that'll be really helpful to know who these students are. And a critical piece in this is the identification. They use one of 2 fields. One is that initial, the change in the ELAS, which is the English Language Acquisition Code, to EL, whatever that date was, or the initial US school enrollment date is also used. So whichever came first is what they use currently. So if you want to know more information about how to effectively establish what that initial US enrollment day was, see the CALPADS Flash 272.
Okay, we have a question, but it's not pertaining to CALPADS, so let's back up a little bit to the MyCD Connect updates. We did have a question we said we'd answer live. For a charter school, if the school's administrator is tasked with SARC, dashboard, and LCAP, do they need to assign a coordinator?
No, you don't have to. If you're automatically in there, you're good to go. But if you have any need for assistance, or you want somebody else to be able to access the SARC, for instance, if anybody else might be doing additional, like uploading your physical fitness test participation rate information, that's one of the few remaining fields that has to be manually entered, then you might want to add somebody, but you shouldn't have to if you have access to everything.
That's the only other question. I will give a shout out to Burbank in the chat here. They're having a really good conversation with other districts about trouble getting program extracts uploaded to CALPADS. So they're kind of talking amongst themselves.
Okay. Thank you, Burbank. Is that Robin?
It is.
All right, Robin knows.
She started it.
Okay, so let me catch back up. I think back.
Legislative updates.
Yes, legislative updates.
We'll just hammer out a few of these that are probably reminders for many of you before we get into our task section. So just a few quick reminders for Assembly Bill 2268, which was signed into law. We'll talk just briefly here about the accountability side of it, and stay tuned as the assessment. We'll talk more about the impact and implications that might have, but just as a reminder that the LPAC will not be given to TK students beginning this year. And like I said, stay tuned for more of that. AB 3216, the Phone Free School Act, I think everyone's favorite, or one of them, okay? Which basically requires every school and district and charter, county office included, develop a policy limiting the use of smartphones by July 1st, 2026. there's an emphasis in this with the sites developing a policy. The idea behind this is just to create more educational engagement, reduction potentially in bullying, reduction in the need to be on the phone and part of social media during school hours. Stay tuned as we probably hear about how that's rolled out in various sites at various levels. We have both here the AB 2074, the EL roadmap, which basically requires the Department of Education to develop a statewide, more comprehensive and streamlined process to support the already existing EL roadmap policy, as they noticed that there were some differences in how that policy was being rolled out amongst districts and LEA. So stay tuned as that's waiting for a signature or veto. And the ever famous, I'm sure the LCAP in the back, and for those of you that oversee the LCAP are aware of Senate Bill 1315, the School Accountability Consolidation Bill, which is really aimed at reducing any sort of duplicative efforts or redundancies amongst governing documents that are submitted. So we'll kind of stay tuned and see how that rolls out. And AB 1955, the SAFE Act, the Support Academic Futures and Educators for Today's Youth Act. So California school districts no longer can adopt parental notification policies that require teachers to inform parents of their child, if their child asks to use a different name or a pronoun other than what's assigned to them at birth, or if they engage in activities and use spaces designed for the opposite sex. There is a lot of, if you go to the link and you read, there's a lot of other information. It has been very controversial, but it has passed, and we're seeing just kind of how that unfolds. And now, in between accountability and assessment, we are going to bring together both of us, and we're going to be talking about CASP and kind of that intersection between how accountability and assessment play into both. So we have the whole team kind of tagging on this one. I'll turn it over to Evan.
All right, thank you. Clicker again. Yeah, this was the Venn diagram that I always loved, because when I was at a district, I always thought, wow, I've got the CASP results. Wait, is this assessment or does this go in the accountability bucket? And oh wait, there's the data piece too. And so I think this is really where the DAAN network is really helpful when you have these kind of problems. And last year we had similar problems. We talked about LPAC and reclassification. It brings in the data piece, it brings in the assessment piece, and then of course has accountability implications. And so we noticed something that propped up this year. We thought, well, we should really talk about this from that perspective, where we all kind of have a little bit of a stake in this information. We all know something about this information, and what are the long-term implications. And this one was really, and this is actually going to inform our extension activity. We actually had the extension activity already identified before we started hearing this information. It seems to be something that, popping up everywhere. And that is, well, first let me go through, did I just cover this there? I think we had your name on it, but we just, this was from a presentation that the state board received from ETS back in September. But you should know this timeline if you're dealing with the assessment data. So you have that final data file that's delivered to the CDE. But before that, even, you have your data that's populating in SIRS, right? And up until a certain date, it can be updated on a pretty regular basis. So by August, when we were talking to districts and charters, they're saying, can I trust this? Is this preliminary data? How do I define this? Can I share this data? It's like, no, it's your data. It's going to be accurate. It may tweak a little because, and they're trying to get better at it, but the data continues to populate throughout August, and then they hit that end of August, and then they have to close it all up. They hermetically seal the results and ship it off. And by then you get your summative test score data in SIRS is final, right? Everything that goes on to the CDE is done. There's no more changes. So there's this preview period that we're in for one more day. Did anybody, by the way, just anybody online or in the room, not receive any of the preview information? If you didn't receive the preview information and you're eligible for it, okay, so there's several districts, including our own, LACOE, we never received them. I talked to okay, you never received them, okay. So make sure if you're in the room, just let us know, because we'll get you with the day or two remaining. We'll make sure you have the credentials to log in. We asked the CDE at a meeting last week. We said in real time, we're not receiving this. And they were like, well, if it should have gone to everybody, every CASP coordinator. It clearly did not. A lot of people didn't get it. So we've been trying to backfill. So if you're in the room, let us know. We'll make sure you get it. If you're online, drop your email in the chat. So the question in the room was, is this deadline going to be extended because of the late notice? No, it won't be extended. However, and we don't have it up here, but we can show you, you can download the data files. The data files are available under the research files link, and then you'll have access to everything. It's not as pretty, but at least you'd have the data. And really, at this point in the process, it's really kind of help you prepare, and that's the communicating results that we're going to talk about a little bit later, to see the kind of where are we, so that when the data drops, you're ready to go with some, really good information to inform your community. But yeah, they're not going to. I'll go back with the CDE because they were adamant. No, we sent it to everybody on the list, and clearly they did not. So the planned public release is on October 15th, and as in years past, we expect you'll see a flurry of information come out. There'll be, EdSource or these, and LA Times will probably publish something. And so, what this presentation by ETS was set to do was to help set the record straight, if you will, in terms of the media interpretations. And we actually went back and found last year's an example that was like, wow, this is full of kind of misinterpretations of data, and they have a resource and everything. But the Smarter Balance Consortium states asked the Smarter Balance developers to help them to clarify the understanding. And most typically what you'll hear is only 50% of students were meeting standard. And that's just false, right? Even students who are in that level 2 are functioning at grade level. It's just the degree to which they function. And so Stephen's going to go into a little more detail, but this was intended, and I have linked the actual presentation that you may want to listen to. It's in Canvas, so you can go back. It's timestamped, so you go right to it and hear from ETS how they articulated it, because they did a probably better job than we will do, because it's their job. But there are key differences across states in how it's reported, but it tends to get lumped together, and it's like the quick slash and burn news coverage is often pretty harsh, right? And it's like, oh, look, our district only had 40% of students meeting grade level who are at grade level in math, and that's just not true. So they've developed this flyer. This is also in Canvas, and it's linked here. But this tool will help you, and I strongly recommend using this in conjunction with watching the presentation to the state board to help you start crafting your messages that will be going out for that October 15th, and for the presentations you may be giving to the board or to your principals, to start building understanding around how Smarter Balance actually determines the grade level standards and what's being measured by it. And I am going to hand it over to Stephen.
Absolutely. So I think one of the key messages in that presentation by Linnell Morgenthaler of ETS to the State Board of Education on the 11th of September is that understanding the assessments is integral to being able to accurately speak to what a score means. So they did spend some time describing what those assessments look like. Of course, we're aware that there's 2 parts to those assessments: a computer adaptive test and a performance task. That computer adaptive assessment is what allows an assessment to be shorter than it would otherwise be and have accurate results. And those performance tests are very open-ended. Examples of what you might have in ELA literacy, they cited the Smarter Annotated Response Tool as a great place to look at as a source for understanding what a 1, 2, 3, 4 might look like in terms of a grade level result, a resource for working with students, with teachers, with parents, and the community. The core of this is in combating misconceptions or misinterpretations of the data, so that we're all on the same page with understanding what the data means. If we hit the next slide, they also went about describing examples of math, what what it looks like at levels 1 through 4. There's a few slides missing from this presentation that are in the State Board of Education presentation. There's also a link to that in the Canvas page. Those different increasingly complex items were exampled in a grade 6 level for math, and you can see those range from a starting out how to mix a juice ginger ale mocktail to rate questions at a level 3 and overpriced candles at a level 2. Really good examples of what it looks like to perform at each of those levels, be able to answer each of those levels. But what does it mean overall when the students are performing less than standard? So we know that dividing line of less than standard at level 1, 2, above standard at level 3, 4, we know that dividing line looks different from this image, and the message was, and the recurrent theme of something that appears in the media that ought to be reevaluated was that a level 2 or level 1 score on the reading language arts the portion of the CAS means a student cannot read. Explicitly, they stated that any student who's able to score on the CAS assessment is approaching those standards, and that level 2, 3, and 4 all demonstrate grade level performance with increasing accuracy and complexity. Those 3 and 4 levels are almost identical, 75% to 80% in terms of students able to be successful in college based on a grade 11 CAS score. And then that level 2 also a significant number of students able to achieve success and pass out of the remedial classes when entering college as well. So key message is that students at level 2 aren't necessarily off grade level. They're achieving grade level standards, and the examples of the context of that test show us what that looks like in at different proficiency levels. What does a 3 look like? What does a 2 look like? How are those cut scores established, and how does that look? So getting in and understanding that assessment, really important. I also recommend watching the ETS's presentation to the board. That's up on the Canvas site.
All right, thank you, Stephen. And with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Everybody can get some more coffee. If you're at home, just take a quick stand up at home. If you're at work, I bet you wish you were at home. Get up and move around a little bit, and we'll come back at 10 o'clock and continue with the more assessment updates. Okay, we're going to resume. We got into the weeds around assessment data. Go figure. Put a bunch of data nerds in the room together. It's bound to happen. Anyway, I'm going to kick it over to our newish colleague, Sarah Nitsos from the assessment unit.
Hello, everyone. As Evan said, I am Sarah Nitsos, and I am with the assessment unit with my colleague, Stephen, and we're going to go over some assessment updates. So first, something that a lot of us have been waiting years and years for is the SACE interface to TOMS. Some warnings about this. On the bottom, you'll see some SACE documentation that is really a step-by-step instructional guide to help you do this process. And next to it is a very supportive video that was put together by Joe Valero. It really walks you through all the steps. But a little warning, if you go through the steps to regenerate your security credentials in the TOMS interface to put into SACE, you need to make sure you put those same credentials into your SIS. Otherwise, parents will no longer have access to all of their student score reports, and you'll start getting phone calls. Just a couple of notes on this piece. TOMS will be a nightly export. The first time it will export everything, and from that point forward, it will only export new updates. But they will be updating from the future IEP tab. So with that, it's important to correct any errors and make sure that that is resubmitted until those errors are cleared. After the initial export, as I said, it will only update from this any changes made to the statewide assessment form for that day. So it's really important that that statewide data page is up to date and clear. Updates are ongoing into this API interface, so you might see some changes and hopefully it will just get better and better. Some challenges are that we're going to have no more CALPADS style error code documentation. Identifying how an error is created and how the data fields are validated might be a little bit challenging, and we'll be needing to contact TOMS for assistance with unfamiliar errors. There's a lot of documentation to support this, and I, for one, am very excited about this new interface. This is a little bit of old news, but wanted to make sure we put it out there that as of September 17th, our LPAC interims doubled. So every single reading, speaking, listening, all of those for every grade level or grade level span doubled. So we have a lot more resources to utilize with our community. In addition, we have an improved Lexile and Quantile hub. If you have not had the opportunity to go there, I highly suggest it. The best way to get there would be to go through TOMS. Log in through TOMS. It's on the resources or on the links tab. It's at the very bottom. And when you get there, there's a lot of really wonderful resources to support students and identifying their quantiles or levels. There's lesson plans, games, activities that can all be assigned to students specifically geared to their unique and individual needs. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Stephen.
Wait, you don't get off the hook that easy. We have questions in the chat.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, we do. So Chad asks, what kind of data syncs from SACE to TOMS?
It will be the state assessment piece. So everything that's on the state assessment page in SACE will be what syncs. So if it's extra time, if it's speech to text, all of the information there. So it's very, very important that if you had a second grader and you put no testing in third grade, that's updated.
And we also have a question. Has this integration already launched, and is it available for the California Alternate Assessment for Science?
The API integration has launched. However, nothing will work until you go in or someone at your site goes in and generates those security credentials and inputs them into SACE. The ability to connect with the alternative and set it as an alternative, I'm not quite sure on, so I'll need to research that and get back to you.
And a follow-up question, what happens if coordinators manually update student accommodations in TOMS? Will they be overridden by the SACE integration?
Yes. SACE will be overriding every night. So if you go in and make a manual change and then there is an update to that child's IEP, it will override any of your changes. So if you are making this decision, it might be a good idea to pick one lane or the other.
And then finally, one more. How does this mean we no longer need to formally fill out the template to upload IEP assigned accessibility resources to TOMS?
Let's take a minute to celebrate that. Yes, you no longer have to fill out the CVS upload and upload it all the time, every week. That will take care of it for you.
Once you
have entered your security credentials and verified the connection, the API integration is live, you will actually be able to see in SACE a list for the last 30 days of what has been uploaded and if there are any errors. It is highly encouraged that you open that errors page to double check, because if someone in your district assigned a third grader a calculator, that would be an error that you would need to go back and correct.
One last thing, woohoo.
Woohoo indeed. And now here's Stephen.
So I think I have a mic. One of the errors that was described that was recurrent was that students assigned accommodations or designated supports that were CAA, California Alternate Assessment specific, would throw an error code if the student hadn't been assigned the alternate assessments previously. So I believe that suggests that students would need to have been assigned by a LEA coordinator those alternate assessments prior to the upload of those accommodations and designated supports through that SACE integrated system. Also, there was a recurrent worry about whether your inputted designated supports that supplemented anything in SACE would be overwritten, and they would be overwritten. However, if you have not changed anything in SACE on that upload page, then no additional updates would be made after that update was initially made, and so that might be a mechanism for managing that issue. You could upload designated supports after uploading those SACE uploads, and just have a process that included updating every time there was any update to the IEP or the future IEP page. Probably better to have it all in one place, though. I believe
The only thing that CalPADS will be adding to the TOM system will be whether or not a child has an IEP. So there will be no designated supports or accommodations coming from CalPADS. That was your question, correct? Okay, thank you.
that's the information that we have, yeah. That would be implicit in the future IEP, I believe.
So in the documentation, it says it is important to keep in mind when preparing IEPs during the testing window that applies to students. If an IEP is during the testing window and supports and accommodations have been loaded into the system, it's important they be removed if it has not been agreed upon by the team before the update that evening. Straight from the documentation.
All right, council updates. So that's all developing, and I'm sure there'll be future updates, and we'll get more details. And a lot of the LEAs in LA County use SACE, so it's going to affect a lot of you. Some don't, notably one of our medium districts and one of our largest districts in LA County. But it will affect many of the districts here. So the other systems do not have an automated upload yet. CAST updates. So we are about a month out from September 3rd, but just a reminder that as we're having this, this release of scores on the public reporting website, or a preview that goes through tomorrow on the public reporting website, the scores were dropped in TOMS and SIRS for all remaining tests on September 3rd, and then to your parent portals, all remaining tests on September 4th. So everything is in your system. That's a final file that's uploadable into your data systems and usable as a final file if you pull one from TOMS or SIRS for that purpose. Two additional updates that are general. The California Accessibility Resources Matrix for 24-25 was updated. It's been available for around a month as well. And 90 new ELA math resources and 14 new science resources were developed this summer and should be made available in tools for teachers in late spring of 2024 for those math and science resources. So 4 LPAC resources are expected as well to be available in tools for teachers in late fall 24, with the remaining 6 in winter. Looking at the alternate assessment 1% threshold survey, you should have gotten this in your email, and that 1% threshold, that annual survey for CAS coordinators has opened. It was sent last week. You're asked to categorize any assessment with the alternate assessments beyond 1% of students in a site. You're going to be asked to select one of two justifications, either that you are a small LEA, a single school district, single school district, a small number of students impacting that over LEA threshold, or that there are specialized programs within your LEA, including classroom programs, specialized medical facilities, or foster residential programs. You're also going to be required to certify that your educator's been trained on state guidelines, and your IEP process conforms. As a support for that identification, there is the alternate assessment participation decision-making tool for California available for your IEP teams. Important to work with your IEP teams in utilizing that tool and determining the use of the alternate assessment. There's also a domain exemption tool as well. A lot of those questions of is this assessment appropriate might be directed in appropriate circumstances to that domain exemption tool for LPAC. And also, a new thing, a new feature in TOMS to assist LEAs in estimating expected CAA testing numbers for this year. CDE added a reporting widget in TOMS where you can review a summary of your CAA tested data for the past 3 years, the numbers you've been hitting for the past 3 years. Are you on 1% or above for your LEA and schools? All right, looking at the CAA for Science. We know, of course, that the CAA for Science is a year-long administration. That started September 17th, 2 weeks ago. There is a 2024 Science Administration CAA for Science Administration Planning Guide that is intended to assist you in scheduling the or the components of the CAA into the school year. So as you're looking at what academics looks like for the scope of students who will take the CAA for Science, those same grade levels, 5th, 8th, and one time in high school, for the students who are most severely cognitively disabled. Those embedded performance tasks are intended to be administered once at a time and throughout the year. So be sure to look into that and get those into your schedule for the year-long schedule. If we look at the structure of a performance task embedded in learning, which is the structure of the CAA for Science, we can reflect on the CAST Innovations concept paper and the timeline for development of performance tasks embedded in learning for all CAST assessments, CAST science assessments. In September, a few weeks ago, CDE did not receive an award for a grant to fund the innovations paper. However, the program outlined in the innovations concept paper where science tests will be developed to be embedded in learning will continue to be developed and will be part of the educational program going forward. Those, of course, have not yet been developed, but it's part of state funding to develop those internally despite the lack of grant funding. Moving on to the CSA. New test items were field tested for updates to the CSA assessment last spring. The purpose of that was to support an expansion of the CSA to include speaking and writing constructed response items and a full operational use of the CSA in 2025. That would be spring, I believe, 2025, so this current school year. And at the September 11th State Board of Education, meeting, CDE proposed some revisions to the CSA expansion, the Spanish assessment, the completely optional California Spanish assessment expansion. They're going to recommend that grades 3 through 8 are going to stay the same. They're going to not include speaking, and that high school is going to maintain the full expansion of all 4 domains. That gives some consistency with grades 3 through 8 with the Smarter Balance structure, and alleviates LEAs and local educators from local scoring required for those additional parts. And in line with that work, there have been practice tests that have been developed and distributed that have been updated to include some constructor response items for speaking and writing domains, and those include documentation and scoring rubrics and guides upcoming this next month. And when we look at the implications of these changes, one of the purposes of the optional California Spanish assessment was to provide a high school measure suitable to be used in part for the state seal by literacy. And when the development of CSA began, funds were limited, speaking and writing constructor response items were never developed, and therefore LEAs were unable to administer CSA for the purpose of students attaining state seal of biliteracy. So that work began in order to expand the test so they can be used for state seal of biliteracy. So the implication is that starting this year, this test should be able to be used for state seal of biliteracy. It is not a line item. It's not listed under the usable test for state seal of biliteracy, but once that becomes operational, CDE is going to recommend to legislature that it's included as one of the options to meet in part requirements for state seal of biliteracy, or the testing component of it. So great test, and something that pays your district a nominal amount amongst the apportionment funds. So if you take the CSA, you get paid. Of course, we all know what the cost is of many of the outside tests. Looking at the timeline, in the next slide, we look at the current state of that adoption. It was last month. CDE wanted to advertise some site administrator convenings. These are intended for site administrators and are direct from CDE. There's some links at the bottom of the slide if you want to check out those and get yourself or your administrators signed up for those. Looking out to the Smarter Balance mathematics, there's a timeline for item banks on the Smarter Balance mathematics, and they are currently in the process of conducting item bank analysis. This would be based on the updated mathematics framework. And I'm going to hand it back over to my colleague, Sarah.
Thank you, Stephen. So on the topic of timeline changes, we wanted to make sure you are aware that this TASP regulations timeline has changed just slightly. In order to have the results published by October 15th, they are closing the window beginning June 30th. So just want to make sure that that is on your radar. Additionally, to put on your radar, you might have noticed if you've looked at the student score reports for the 23-24 data, they have changed slightly. So the CDE has put together a series of videos that would be really helpful to share with families so that they really understand how to read those student score reports. Those videos are for almost all of the assessments, and they are included in both Spanish and English. So just wanted to let you know that those are available and very helpful for parents. All right, let's get to the LPAC reports. People who work in middle schools might recognize this as the most current hairstyle. As Hillary alluded to earlier, we're going to talk briefly about Assembly Bill 2268, which is the transitional kindergarten and LPAC. We have Devin from our Moss unit in the house. So if you have any additional questions related specifically to the impact on English language learners, she would also be a good resource. So in looking at the impact that this bill might have, here are some of the impacts that have been outlined by the CDE. It's going to reduce the taker count in our kindergarten by 31% and over this last year. We'll be monitoring kindergarten results in this coming year, and we'll be looking to changes in scores when compared to previous administrations, especially since we're losing 31% of the score base. In general, our TK students have lower performance than kindergarten students, specifically when it comes to writing. And there'll be a monitoring of psychometric analyses, since the removal of TK from calibration may have an impact on the equating. The CDE is recommending a services first approach. Devin is nodding her head. That our TK students are we continue to provide language services to them regardless of their language designation. This is aligned with our California roadmap, and it is a policy to affirm, welcome, and respond to all of our learners within all of our classrooms. LEAs can choose to use additional services and forms, such as screeners that you already have, or desired results developmental profiles, or the OPTL, the Observation Protocol for Teachers of English Learners, to get more information on how to better support the TK learners in our rooms. The CDE has also provided some guidance that yes, we will continue to collect home language surveys from every child, including our TK students. However, when they are entered into our systems, they will be entered in as TBDs. These TBDs are not subject to that 30-day assessment guideline that the other grades are. And the guidance is that the LEAs will use this as a pre-identification of those TK students so that we are identifying who might need assessment when they walk into kindergarten. This guidance will hold unless future legislation changes. Questions? Room? Yes, Devin. Yes, please.
I just think that one important thing to know is that the CDE right now is referring to those TK students who are designated as TBD as multilingual TK students. So that is sort of how you can refer to them instead of we wouldn't want to call them TBD students, right? And they're not actually English learners, right? Because they haven't taken the initial LPAC. So the term that they're using is multilingual TK students.
Thank you so much, Devin. So great to have you in the room with us today. All right, and that leads us to our question and answer portion of our experience. Are there any questions in the chat that we need to hit up? Or in the room?
I wanted to add a couple things before we go to Q&A. And Evan had presented on CalPADS deadlines, and I wanted to reiterate a Census Day reminder. And Census Day, of course, is tomorrow, so you're not going to be able to do anything about it. But Census Day reminder to complete initial LPAC, initial alternate LPAC. And that's to be included in unduplicated pupil count, used for determining funding for supplemental concentration grants under LCFF. Newly enrolled students must complete the entire initial LPAC, all 4 domains, or initial alternate LPAC before Census Day, which is tomorrow. And I wanted to add one more thing, and that is about NCES, the NAEP, NAEP, which is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And normally about 150 California schools are selected to represent US. And that's for assessing long-term trends for an age group window. You're probably in the progress or about to start that if you're doing age 13 at one of your schools. Age 9 is coming up in January 6th, age 17, March 17th. But in addition to that, NAEP is going to be conducting some field tests to explore implications and consequences of transitioning to school-owned device rather than distributing or testing on NAEP-provided devices. And that's going to include approximately 900 additional California public schools selected to participate in that field test. And there is a note that participation in NAEP mathematics and reading assessments for grades 4 and 8 is mandatory for schools and districts that accept Title I funds. Are there any questions?
There have been a few questions. We may have to pull Devin in to answer some of these. She already did. I want to share one that she answered. Daniel question was, students who fill out a home language survey in TK, should LEAs give them another home language survey to fill out when entering kinder? The answer is no. Only one. Devin, thank you for answering that. Only one home language survey should ever be administered. So that's an important one. Yeah, question up front. Stephen, you want to take that? Maybe restate the.
Also, I believe the question is if the student passed or IFEP'd on the LPAC, but as a kinder, 1 year after they entered PK and then started kinder, are they an RFEP or an IFEP? That would it would be the same designation as before. If they're taking the initial LPAC and they complete that with proficiency, that would be an IFEP, a student initial fluent English proficient, even though they've been in TK for presumably a year.
I should know this is kind of more a CalPADS question. For 24-25 TKs, do we use their enrollment start date as their TBD start date? Looking at you, Devin. First day of enrollment would be the TBD. Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't be doing pre-enrollment. Like if these were kinders, you could do pre-enrollment. Jaime, you saying yes? Yes. So answer your question, Lydia. You do use their enrollment start date as their TBD start date. Sarah responded to the question in the chat. TBD students won't be counted for LCFF. Why, Sarah?
LCFF takes into account students who already have an EL designation, and our TK students will not have that EL designation, therefore not in the calculation by census day as of.
All right, thanks. The initial LPAC has to be completed today or tomorrow to be included on census day. Probably would not, if you are still administering, would not make it back in time from TOMS into CalPADS to count for your LPAC, but that student may still be meeting in another way. They might still be included in your unduplicated pupil count. So ELs, is one of the 3 unduplicated pupils groups that are included in there. So do not despair. Justine asked, Stephen, can you expand on the CSA revision slide? Does this mean that there will no longer be speaking, no microphones that students need to use, et cetera? I'm not seeing this on the CD website. Want to verify as this is our first through 3rd grade DLI cohort, and we are deciding if we're wanting to administer the CSA.
Yes, I believe that means that the assessments for 3 through 8, grades 3 through 8, will revert to what was seen prior to piloting the speaking component of the assessment for those grades. So I would expect that to be removed. The slides did suggest that that component would be included in the practice tests, but I imagine the practice tests will conform to the grade level outcome so that they look like the grade level decisions that were made for the CSA. That's as of September 11th, State Board of Education meeting. So I would say this is all very new, of course.
Any other questions in the room? Marcus, I see you're in the chat. Are you live with us? This is our
Yes, I
favorite-
am. I am here.
All right, the voice of Marcus coming from the
Hello.
heaven. Can you crank it up a little bit, Marcus? Might be us, but we're not hearing you.
Is that better?
Yep,
Okay.
it'll have to
perfect.
work.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for the comment in the chat section. I believe so. As far as um alternate designations, that's going to be a little different. So that's a test, not test settings or demographic information, but that's a test assignment. So if the student requires an alternate designation, I believe that still needs to be updated through the test assignment file. I believe Jonathan had that question earlier from what I'm seeing in the chat. So yeah, that would still be a manual population or selection or an upload from Tom's for the test assignment itself. Hello and good morning, everybody.
Marcus,
Yeah. Mhm.
good morning. Oh yeah, I was going to say, do you want to take over sharing? Do you have a slides for this morning?
Yeah, I do. I'll go and do that right now. Okay, so just a couple good housekeeping tips here, I guess, for everybody since we're starting the administration year and we're currently in the middle of that. So we have all of our CASP and LPAC manuals online. There's the link listed there, and I'll be sharing this with the DAAN team a little bit later as well, and they'll be able to integrate this into their slides as well. If you have any questions or need any support from myself, we have a couple different outlets of communication. Myself and my counterpart, Dina Becerra, are constantly monitoring chats, calls, and emails throughout the workday. And typically email is the best mode of response for myself, as I might be assisting another LAA coordinator either via chat or on a call with them, or even a virtual one-on-one meeting. So definitely feel free to send those emails. LEA coordinators, please contact the success agent directly unless either your site coordinators or any of your test examiners are in the middle of a live session and experiencing any issues. They can call into us directly, but typically we want to make sure that we are having our LEA coordinators be made aware of all instances that are happening. So please make sure that they touch base with you first prior to you sending an email or having them reach out to us directly while in the middle of a live session. So you can see the email there is region11@ets.org. That's my direct email. And typically the response time within those emails can be 5 to 10 minutes. So as we start getting ready and for both CASP and LPAC, just going to go over a couple things. So when adding users in TOMS, just make sure that if they are manually updated or through a file, they can be uploaded either way through TOMS. If you're using that file upload, there's a process of validation that we have as well. Just make sure that when you're going through that process, when you receive the email for validation, that you are opening that email and making sure that it shows all records accepted. If even one record on that file during the validation process shows as rejected on your email alert you receive after validation, the whole file cannot be uploaded. You have to make sure to adjust and to correct those errors, revalidate again, and then when you receive the email alert for the records all accepted, only then you'll be prompted to go back into TOMS and make sure that you're clicking the upload button. I've had a couple LEAs notice that they didn't have any users when they had stated they had actually uploaded them. Problem is they stopped at the validation part of it. They did not go through the complete upload process. So just make sure you're doing that as well after you've validated those files. Once those users, whether it be manually or through a file upload, once they've been successfully added, they're going to receive 2 emails. The first email typically will show what role they've been added with and will prompt them to log into TOMS. The second emails, though, is what they're waiting for as far as resetting, well, not resetting their password, excuse me, but creating their login credentials. It's going to actually contain highlighted in blue in the second email, a secure verification link, which is available and active for 30 minutes. Now, no need for alarm if they do not reach that email within the 30 minutes. They might be teaching or attending to some other business. If they open that email, there's actually going to be instructions in the body of that email on how to send them a brand new and active link. So all they need to do is open that email, Again, if they've missed the activation period, they'll just follow the prompts in the body of the email and can receive a new link from there as well. Also, please make sure when they receive these emails that they're looking through their junk or spam inbox and making sure that it should be ca assessments@donot reply.org. Please make sure that is whitelisted, so any emails and password resets that those users receive, whether they're creating or having their account created or when they need a password reset, they're receiving those directly to their inbox and not their junk and spam inbox. So please make sure that, just ensure that's been done as well, the whitelisting of those. Now, once they've received those emails, they've created their login credentials. They want to make sure that they're logging into Tom's, especially if it's their first time, all the way through until they reach the landing page for Tom's. If they're not doing that, what's happening is they'll try to access the TA interface, and they're only going to see the interim assessments appear. They're not going to see any, whether it be the initial LPAC or when the summative time comes for summative LPAC and the summative smarter balance tests, they're only going to see interim. And that's because they haven't logged in completely, and we're actually presented with the security forms electronically based on the role that they've been given. So just make sure that they've done that as well and are not stopping just at creating their password and then at a later point accessing the TA interface, because again, those forms are not housed in the TA interface. They are housed in the Tom's login page. Once those forms are completed, it's generally going to take about 30 to 60 minutes for the system to recognize that they've completed the required security forms. And then when they log into the TA interface, they should see all of the tests reflected based on which role they've been given within Tom. So just let them know about that as well. It's going to take about 30 and up to 60 minutes in order for them to access the correct tests and have them reflect in the TA interface. Now, there's a report I'm going to share with you as well next that is the security forms and remote administration status report, which is in Tom's. So this is what this report is going to look like directly. Whoops, I apologize.
Wow.
Yeah, my slides were a little out of order. Apologize for that. Tried putting a screenshot of something there. Sorry, let me go back here. So within Tom's, as you can see, the security forms and remote administration status report on the screenshot listed there. Just please make sure that you're checking those forms. If they ever claim to have completed those, you can always double check that form and download that to see the actual time and date in which they signed, which will look like something like this. So you'll actually be presented with a spreadsheet upon download. It's going to show based on the role that they've been given, if they've signed either the agreement, which is typically associated with those of an LEA coordinator, and then the affidavit, which is usually associated with a site coordinator, a test examiner, test administrator, and some of the other roles as well within Tom's. So as you can see, it has the date and time listed there as well. That's going to show and verify for you that, yes, they actually completed those forms, or no, they did not complete that form. So preparing for testing, and this goes for both sides, for CASP and LPAC, just make sure, and I made an example of the initial LPAC since we're in the middle of that testing right now at this time, just make sure all the demographic information is populating within Tom's. As you can see there, a lot of the time what happens is they have to have that ELAS status of TBD and the primary language of Spanish or any other language other than English, and that includes ASL. They have to make sure that those populate first before they actually are eligible for the initial LPAC. If that shows as blank or does not have those fields populated, what's going to happen is they're not going to be assigned. And typically, a lot of the test examiners see that when they try to administer the initial LPAC, it shows no test available. And 99% of the time in cases, it's because those fields are blank. So make sure that you're working with your CALPADS administrator in order to make sure those fields reflect within Tom's as well. So this pertains specifically to the initial LPAC and the RSVP process for this year. So just make sure that if you are scannable for kindergarten K through 2, scannable Form 1 answer booklets and Form 2 kindergarten writing answer booklets are returned to us after the parent guardian notification of the results have been completed and a pre-ID label has been received and attached for the student on the answer booklet. Please make sure that you're not sending incomplete answer booklets as well. We will not be able to grade those and score those accordingly. And I believe they will be sent back to the LEA as well, or we'll actually have somebody from our team reach out to you if we have any incomplete answer books. So just make sure that those are being sent. If you're part of the RSVP list on our site, we do have an RSVP. It's not the same as the lookup tool from last year, but there's actually a list for the 24-25 year on our LPAC, CASPANLPAC.org page. So please make sure that you're looking at that as well and verifying if you're on the RSVP list. So since we've passed the primary ordering window for the initial LPAC materials, if you're ordering any supplemental materials for TOMS, please remember that it is only students K through 2 that require these answer booklets. Grades 3 through 12, they test all online. So there's no need to order any booklets. And when you actually go into TOMS to place that supplemental order, there's only going to reflect grades K through 2. When you place that supplemental order and it's been confirmed, what's going to happen is those supplemental orders will arrive 10 to 14 business days after they've been placed in TOMS. If you're not able to wait within the period or need those booklets faster, please first work with a neighboring LEA to see if they have any other available booklets. If not, please send us an email directly to see if we can expedite that order for you. Now, something important that I've noticed somewhat of a call driver and email driver is for grades 3 through 12 for the initial LPAC, please ensure that not only that the writing domain has been completed, but make sure whoever completes that writing domain with the student, the test examiner, they need to make sure that they're going into the initial teacher hand scoring system to ensure that those responses have been actually scored and not just marked as tentatively scored, but actually scored and completed. So just make sure that they're going into the, again, teacher hand scoring system, accessing that, scoring the student responses from the writing domain for grades 3 through 12, and then submitting that scoring as well. If the hand scoring is outstanding and hasn't been either not scored or only shows as tentatively scored, what's going to happen is a score and a student score report for the initial LPAC will not populate for that student until that last component has been completed. And this is what the initial LPAC THSS summary report or the teacher hand scoring system report. So if you have any hand scoring that is outstanding, any students will appear from here. If the student still appears and you've actually verified in the hand scoring system that the student responses are no longer there, please allow at least 24 hours or a nightly update for the report. There have been some instances where the student doesn't have a student score report. They check the THSS summary report and they see the student still on there because they just completed the writing domain as of that day and the hand scoring was completed when they actually log into the hand scoring system. That report is not a real-time report. It's typically about 24 hours and nightly that report updates. And this is just overviewing again regarding the ELAS. This is what it will look like within TOMS for the student who has that blank ELAS and the primary language fields. So again, please just make sure, I get this question a lot. So make sure you're checking TOMS and working with your CALPADS administrator to ensure that those fields are updated properly in CALPADS and that CALPADS is sending that information to TOMS. Now, this is one I want to touch on because I found a lot of examples already this year, but I started noticing it last administration year through the initial year. For the speaking domain, regardless of grade, please make sure that it's completed and closed prior to entering the speaking DEI responses. So this is a big thing that trips up a lot of the LEAs regarding their completion. So they have let's say they administer the speaking domain, and at that stopping marker, the test examiner stops. However, when they stop and they log the student out, they need to make sure before they're doing that, they're either stopping at the stopping marker and selecting end test, or if they choose to move forward and then the student stops responding to those, that they are clicking next on the stopping marker. Because what happens is the speaking domain remains open. They access the speaking DEI, start entering those responses, and they complete the DEI. But you'll keep receiving email alerts saying that the speaking domain hasn't been completed. And the reason is because it's still in a paused state or a paused status. Although the speaking DEI may have been completed, we need to make sure that the speaking domain is being either ended correctly on the stopping marker, or you are selecting next question on that. And it actually shows that on the domain itself, because we need to make sure that that speaking domain shows as first submitted, and then it changes to reported in the completion. Because what will happen is we'll need to go back and actually submit a STARS. So this saves you a little bit of time and headache in filing STARS reports. Because the speaking DEI locks the speaking domain after it has been completed, you will not be able to access the speaking domain again to either end test or go through the next questions and then end test after the stopping marker. So you need to make sure that it is completed fully before accessing the speaking DEI. Please make your test examiners aware of that. It's a very important part of the administration, and it'll save you so much time and so much headache with STARS having to reopen the DEI and then access the speaking domain. So there are two fields I want to address within the demographic information, just making sure that if the student requires an accommodation, please make sure, or this also goes for the initial alternate LPAC or an alternate assessment, that both the CALPADS special education field and the special education field for testing both reflect yes. Just please make sure that if they require either an alternate assessment and or accommodations for that, they both have to reflect yes. So this is another kind of a pain point for some LEAs that I've noticed, so I wanted to address this. So as far as when it comes to the test examiner, and this goes for all tests, both LPAC and CASP, before approving the test for a student, please make sure that the test settings prior to approval are being the eye or eyeball icon, which I'll show a brief demonstrate or a brief screenshot of next, is being checked by the examiner before approving that student. If a student actually enters a test, is approved for testing, and then they notice that the test setting and or accommodation that they should have is not there, that results in a STARS incident report having to be filed by either the site coordinator or the LEA coordinator, because the student started that test without having the proper accommodations or settings. So this is what it will look like in the TA interface. You'll see that small little eyeball icon there, and they'll be able to view the details. So please make sure that they're checking that. If the student, again, does not have the correct test settings and or accommodations, do not approve that student. Allow either for that time if the settings were just recently updated, or if the student goes in and they don't have those, don't approve the student. Make sure that that's updated first before moving forward with that. And again, if they move forward in the administration of that test, student notices they don't have the correct test settings or accommodations, a STARS incident report will need to be filed in order to have that test completely reset. And this just goes towards, as some of the LEAs are working on some of the interim assessments, please note that with the interim assessments and specifically for the ICAs, both the interim test and the performance task must be completed of the same opportunity as well. So they have to be, ICAs also require some hand scoring. Some IABs do, but there should be a list on what actually needs to be hand scored. But if the computer portion and the performance task portion are not being completed together, no score results are going to be produced within SIRS for those interim assessments. And that also goes along with, again, any required hand scoring for those interim assessments given. There's not going to be any data within SIRS until either both ICAs are completed and if there's any outstanding hand scoring that hasn't been completed as well. And this goes hand in hand with SIRS as well, with TAs being able to or testing administrators being able to view that score data within SIRS. Just please make sure that the student groups are being created and uploaded. I know some of your SIS vendors you're working with directly in order for those groups to be uploaded directly from your LEA, and that's fine too as well. If your SACE, or excuse me, your SIS vendor doesn't have that capability yet, they will need to be uploaded manually within SIRS. Oh, sorry, this Oh, okay. So these are completion reports. Yes, thank you. The completion reports, so they can be accessed in TOMS under the links tab. So this goes for the completion reports for any assessment, including interim assessments, initial LPAC, summative LPAC, smarter balance once we get there. So you're going to be able to access that through the completion status right here. So this is what it's going to look like when you access that link, the completion status link. This is our TIDE system. I believe it's changed names. I'll see if I can get that name as well for you all. But this is what it's going to look like when you log in. So there are typically two different sections you can go to. You can either look under plan and manage testing under the dropdown, or search by SSID, which will allow you to search by any students that have currently any outstanding tests, whether they are in a pause status or completed. And it looks a little bit different this year. It's not any big updates, but when you access the plan and manage testing part of that, it's going to look a little bit different. We have a basic search and the advanced search. So this is what the basic search looks like. And then our advanced search is what you're familiar with already, allowing you to see the different search filters that you can use as well. So you can get as specific as you like as far as which test you're looking for, the exact name of the test, the administration. This is just an example of last year. And then the get specific portion as well, which will allow you to use any one of these radio buttons here in order to drill down to a certain filter that you're using for which specific tests, anything like that. Now, this is the search by SSID feature. It's a little bit different from our plan and manage. The way this works is you're able to type in any SSID, and I believe it's up to 20 SSIDs as long as they're separated by a comma. And you're going to see any tests that the student either took or is in the middle of. You'll see it as a pause status, or if they've submitted a test that day, and if it shows as submitted and then reported. Now you can use either this plan and manage feature and the search by SSID feature. It's a little bit more real time than TOMS. The TOMS completion reports, those are not going to show you real time like this system is. It's going to be typically an overnight update for those completion reports that are used in TOMS to update that information for students who complete. And with that, is there any questions? I'll take a look at the chat as well. I'll stop sharing here.
First question is about your PowerPoint, and we will share that as soon as you send it to us. We'll put it in Canvas, and then when we send out our follow-up, make sure that it's front and center for everybody.
Yeah, I'll clean it up for you before I send it to you. No problem.
I think all the other questions that have come in have largely been were related to earlier questions. Are there any questions in the room for Marcus?
Feel free to come off mute. Any questions or anything like that?
Oh, we got one up front. Hold on one second.
Sure. Great question, Jeb. Yes, I believe it's going to be updated this year. And I believe it's around, I'll see if I can get a specific date. I believe it's around October in which that's updated.
Great. We're on 17 now, so I just want to know so we can get that moved through our system.
Yeah, I know there's going to be typically when there's ever an update when it's no longer going to be supported, we'll send an email alert out to all the LEAs letting you know that at this point, and I think it's October, I want to say it was October 31st last year, and it's on the same track as this year. So they'll actually provide a table within the email alert that's sent saying what's not going to be supported after a specific date and then what will continue to be supported.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Good morning. I'm not sure if this is for maybe Marcus or the team or maybe someone else completely different, but our district has been working with interim assessments. We're diving in already. So our science teachers, we do have cast interims, but their question is, when will those interim assessments kind of be available in the interim assessment item portal? The IAIP, so that they can preview or just focus on certain standards. We have it currently for ELA and math, but not for science and LPAC.
Yeah, let me double check. I think I might have that information. When they're logging into the interim assessment portal, it doesn't have any cast items available, or?
No, they do have cast items available. This is where teachers can kind of preview questions. I know they can go through the viewing system and log in almost like a student, but there's something which is the interim assessment item portal that you can go into, and so there they only have ELA and math.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'll see if I can look into that for you. And this is just for cast, correct? The cast interim assessments.
Cast for sure, but I know eventually they're going to ask about LPAC as well.
Sure. Okay. Not a problem.
So Marcus, you can correct me if I go off base here, but my understanding is that portal is a smarter balanced portal and therefore not California specific, whereas the science test and LPAC are California specific.
Yes,
Makes
but
sense.
I think I'm gonna have to get just a little more information from our Smarter Balance team on the nuances for specifically for cast, since it's a California-based assessment, but I'll double check with them today.
All right, thank you. Any other questions in the room? All right. Thank you. Thank you. We have a couple more things. Hillary, before we bring up a couple, we're going to talk about a few things, but Hillary, I want you to bring up the next slide. Oh, we got to change it over here. Hold on one sec. Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate you always being here. And I'm going to take over sharing from you.
And while we get this booted up, if you have your phone, you're going to need it for this next section, please. We do have a tiny URL as well.
Okay.
We are always looking to make sure that the information that we provide to you is not only timely, but that it meets your needs and that we also have a good pulse on the information that we provide to you. So if you can take a moment, give us about 2 minutes, whether you're in Zoom land or if you're here in person, you can use a tiny URL or you can use your phone and just kind of use the QR code there and give us some feedback and let us know what you found valuable in today's meeting. Who might you share this with? Who's your next go-to person? Additionally, a lot of you in here wear multiple hats. Some of you are going to be taking this information and you consolidate it and distill it and share it certain parts with principals or site level leadership. Let us know what are some other valuable pieces of information as they relate to assessment and accountability that maybe you would like to see. So take the next 2 minutes or so, give us some of your feedback before we move on and talk to you a little bit about some learning opportunities we have going on.
We want to bring up one of our colleagues here from LACOE and Jamie Nichols from our 21 CSLA. She's going to plug the most amazing data and assessment inspired. I say that because we've been working with them. Go ahead, Jamie. Tell the folks what we've got that they might be interested in.
All right. Good morning. It is great to be with you today and learning with you. It's just a pleasure. I'm here for, a lot of you may know Tina Macias. She is the face of our CSLA here, and she's not able to be here, so I get to do this. I have the pleasure of doing this. So in your booklet, you have here, hopefully you have one, and there are free PD in here. So CSLA, is that new for anybody in the room? No, so let me remind you, CSLA, California Schools Leadership Academy, is not CSLA, Cal State LA. So with that, when you hear CSLA, we want you to equate free PD. So everything in this booklet is free, okay? Everything. So when you look at this, there's four different events that I want you to look at. There's one called Assessing Impact, and it's being led by Stephanie Fortunato. That may be a name that you all know and love, and we are just so proud and excited for this event to come. So there's that one, and there's the other one that I really wanted to highlight for us is the Navigating Data, and that is with our team here. That's what we're partnering with Hillary and Evan, and it has been a pleasure. We already started that one, but wait, you can still join it. It's a hybrid series. So the first day was in person, to kind of set the pace, but it's okay. If you didn't attend that, you still have opportunity. There's, I think, 4 more sessions, and they're virtual. And the first virtual one is late October. I think it's October 29th. So there's that one as well. There are two other ones that has to do with data, and it's with Dr. Andrew Knipp. I learned that he pronounces the K. So it's data equity and let me turn to it, guys. I just marked my thing. Equity and data book. So there's just 4 that I just highlighted, but there's a lot more here for you to do and to see. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We are excited and eager to partner with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Janie. And we did just add the links into the chat. If you're online, all the registration links for all of the things that Janie just mentioned. And I think we have a couple more things just to plug. Obviously, Dan, you're here, so you don't need to know about this, but just a reminder, we'll continue to meet hybrid. We actually do have one meeting that's virtual only in February because we had some room conflicts, but otherwise everything's going to be in person. And for those of you in person, we really appreciate you being here. This is one of the sessions that Janie just plugged, and we did start already, but we do have 5 remaining sessions, or 4, I think. And you can jump in at any time. They're self-standing. And then a couple things coming up for the assessment team.
So we have our Wednesdays at 1. We will be launching those starting actually January 29th. We will have 2 special sessions, one in October and one in November, to just make sure everybody has all of the resources that they need. If you've attended a Wednesday at 1 this last year, you have already been registered for our entire Wednesdays at 1 series. There's no need to do anything further, but we'd like to have you join us. So if you have not, please go ahead and register. Additionally, we have a series of workshops coming up that we wanted to make sure are on your radar. We have an accessibility support that we're doing in tandem with our LACOE SPED department here. And it'll be a 2-part workshop, really reviewing those supports and how they can be leveraged in instruction as well as for the assessment. We'll be going over LPAC interims, as our friend noticed earlier. We will be having a full workshop on LPAC interims. We'll be doing Unlocking Smarter's Toolbox because there are so many resources and they just keep growing. And we'll be doing the Smarter Balanced Content Explorer, which is really a wonderful resource to support writing and the ELA performance tasks. This in addition to a whole myriad of other resources that are accessible on our link at the bottom. Thank you, Evan.
And for those of you online, thank you for joining us. We're going to turn off the Zoom and we're going to meet human to human. I know we're excited for this. I'm sorry you couldn't join us. There's nothing, the information that you'll be missing that is critical. We made sure to put that up front, but we did want to have an opportunity just to connect with colleagues and to have be able to share. And it never quite works as well as you'd hope online. So we're trying it out. And thank you for joining us. And we're going to turn off the Zoom now. And if you're in the room, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to come back for our extension session about best practices for communicating your CASP results. So thank you all. We'll see you in 5 minutes.